What has to happen for Joel, in your opinion, for him to get to the point that Jokic got to tonight?
Well,
What's
one, he has to
what's
be healthy.
missing?
Number one, he has to be healthy in the playoffs, and this was the healthiest, but he still wasn't 100%. Then number two for Joe is he's got to make all his players better in the playoffs. And Joe, his numbers are unfair because he's really, if you look at his numbers in the last 3 years in the playoffs compared to his regular season numbers, they're not very good. But a lot of that is due. The first year I had him, he hurts his knee. The next year he gets hit in the face. He tears the ligaments in his hand. And then this year he has a knee injury. And he was never the same once he came back this year. So health is number one. Then the second thing is Joe, and he has the ability, Bill. Now, I stayed on him daily. He has the ability to make his teammates better. And when he does that, if you look at our games this year, when he did that and dominated, hard to go away from Joel Embiid. It really is. He's just got to do that on a consistent basis, not just on the court, but also off the court. Just be around your guys and spend time with your guys and let them know that you love them because they love you. And so I thought that Joe in the 3 years, you can see the growth there. And so I think we forget how young he is. We also forget his first 2 years he didn't play.
Yeah.
And Bill, I'm telling you, that sets a tone. Like when you miss 2 years and you're sitting there all the time and you get used to not playing in games, that sets a tone. Ben Simmons went through the same thing. He missed the first year. And so fighting that early on when I first got there was huge. Joe, you need to play tonight. Joe, you can play tonight. Now he's up in games. And so he's doing it. He's crossed that barrier. The next one will be making his teammates better. When he does that, it's going to be hard to stop. And I think he will do it. I just think, we forget his age and we forget how he started in this league.
There's something with the Sixers culture that I think is a fair criticism dating back to the process, right? Where there's a couple years there where it's like, we just got to collect draft picks. We're thinking outside the box. We're just throwing assets together. It's not about winning. The winning will come later. Are there scars from that? If you approach a franchise like that for 4 years, could you feel the scars coaching the team?
Yeah. You can feel it all through the organization. And, Elton, when he brought me in, that's what he told me. Like, hey, this is not just about coaching this team. We're bringing you in here to change the culture. And he meant everywhere. And he allowed me to come in and we looked through the whole organization. I'm talking about trainers, equipment managers, everybody. And, Bill, I think you've been around me enough. If you're not on board, if you're not trying to win, if that's not what you're breathing every day, for me, it's time to go. And I meant that with everybody in the organization. And overall, I thought we were starting to get it done. You could see, the change in the culture. And so I think the growth of that is there. I think they still have some growth in that department as well. Very media alert is the word I'm using. And sometimes you can't worry about that. You just got to do your job. You got to worry about the basketball part of it and not the reaction to what everything happens. But their culture has definitely gotten better. I had a big part in that. And now the growth from there, it still has to get better. And if that happens, then they have a chance. If it doesn't happen, Bill, they're not going to win. Like it has to keep growing.
So do you look at game 6 where you're up and Tatum's playing like crap and there's like 5 minutes left and you're about to go to the next round? You've had a month to think about it. Do you look back as like, that was just a weird game where this guy who we thought was dead all of a sudden started making shots and within 2 minutes the game flipped? Holy shit. Oh my God, we're losing. Or did that say something more about what was right and wrong with your team?
Probably a little bit of both when I look back on that game, because that was a decider, right?
Yeah.
Basketball wise, we got to get the ball to Joel more. And trust me, we came out in plays where it was should have gone there. And it just didn't arrive there. So those are big plays. Now, listen, Joel was not having a great game.
Yeah.
but neither was Tatum. And my belief is, so what? You still go through your guy and you keep letting him save the day for you. And I thought we went away from that. And then the second part is the fluky part. Tatum, if you remember the big play, we gambled on a play. Someone gambled. I can't remember who it is. Maybe Maxey. I don't even know who it was. Went for a steal, didn't get it, and they gambled off Jason Tatum and
Yeah.
left him wide open, and he made a corner in front of the Celtic bench. And that was, doesn't take these guys but one shot. And that
Well,
was
you
the
felt it
shot.
tonight with Butler. Remember, Butler made one shot, and
Absolutely.
it's like, oh, here it
Yeah.
comes.
Now he's on. And from that point, we were there.
So you felt like Game 7. You felt like that. You didn't feel it with your team.
No, I loved it. I loved us. If you remember the first quarter, we were cooking. We were playing well. Ball was moving. Everybody was involved. The only thing that worried me about that beginning is it was very little of Joel and none of James. And you knew at some point that your two guys, your best players in Game 7, that's the Sam Cassell line. Big games, Game 7, the stars have to lead the way. That doesn't mean it's going to be scoring. That doesn't mean they just have to. And you can feel early on that both were struggling a little bit. And, it's not a lot you can do about it when that happens. It's funny. I thought the Celtics in the first quarter were even tighter. And then that last 6 minutes of the second quarter changed the entire game. And, the third quarter was the longest quarter of my life. Tatum was the thing with the Celtics that make it tough for a coach. They make a lot of tough shots. They make and take bad shots, but they have guys who can do it. And so you would allow it. If I'm coaching them, I would allow it too. Tatum and Brown can make tough shots. And when they do, they become unbeatable. And that's what happened in that game.
Well, I know you told me a story once, I think on a podcast, or maybe it was just privately, about after 2010 Game 7, you saw Thibodeau like a couple years later, and you just started talking about 2010 Game 7. Like you guys had won a title together. And you start gravitating toward the worst possible moment because that's what coaches do. You think of, the worst games. Like, do you think that's a series you're going to think back on, or do you just feel like, you know what?
Listen, unfortunately or fortunately, I always look at it both ways. I've lost 3 games with 3-1 leads, right? And I look both ways. Like my coaching got us to those leads, as well as the players. You look at that Orlando team. My God, we got a 3-1 on the Pistons, and so it's funny. That's a series I don't look back on because
you were overachieving.
Come on. Like we didn't have much of a shot. Then you look at the other one, the Clipper one, where we got the big lead, and Josh Smith and Corey Brewer. If you remember, Kevin McHale took Harden out of the game. If you remember that game,
I went to that game.
Yeah.
And James was on the bench with a towel over his head for 5 minutes, and that series was over.
And Dwight Howard was trying to get thrown out. Like he was committing fouls. The game was over. And then Corey Brewer, I think, makes 4 threes. Josh Smith makes 4, and we get tight. You can see it. You can feel it. That's the only time in my coaching career, I will say this, where the Clippers have had so much failure in their stratosphere. That's the only time in my coaching career you didn't just feel the angst from the players. You could literally feel it in the building. And I will
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I'd mentioned that after it happened, I'd never been, other than with the Red Sox, in a crowd where everybody was like, oh no. It was like a horror movie, because it was like a horror movie with a family that had already been haunted by the ghost, and now the ghost was back. And you could feel this crazy energy, right?
The first one, it's a funny story. The first one who noticed it, remember Austin was on my team, right?
Yeah.
And Austin had a great series in that series. And I took him out, and I think we're up 18, 16 or whatever. And he stops in front of me and Sam and whoever, Lawrence Frank, I think, was on the bench. He said, hey, we're getting tight out there. I'm not saying I need to go in, but we're getting tight. He actually said it. And yeah, we did, especially when they start draining threes from the guys they were draining. I always wonder, like, if one of the better players are draining them, would that have bothered us less?
Yeah. No, it actually felt like an unnatural event was happening, because it's not like Josh Smith was a spectacular 3-point shooter, and it's not like Corey Brewer was either. And they just got in this crazy groove, and I knew the Clips were in trouble because all of a sudden Harden's towel was off and he was standing up, and I was like, oh shit, they think they can win this. It was crazy.
Yeah. That was of all the ones that I think back on, other than just the Game 7, me and Tibbs, I bet we talk about it. We have a yearly talk about that.
About Ron Artest making the three.
And Derek Fisher. Derek Fisher's too. Yeah, but both of them, like, we have this thing, if you don't close out totally, you're dead, right? And if you ever go back and look at those, both of them, Paul Pierce stopped short and, like, challenged them, dared them. And then Rondo did the same thing on Fisher. And those two guys shot it and made it. Our game plan in that game, where we had never trapped Kobe in any of the games that we played in. And the night before, I talked to Tibbs and I said, hey, this is the game we have to trap him. He's not going to trust it. He's going to try to win this game tonight.
Well, you were playing the hero ball. You thought he'd want to be the hero, and you tried to play into it, right?
Yeah, and it worked. And then all of a sudden, those two passes, he gave it up, and those guys made the shot. So give them credit. They made the shot, and give Kobe credit because he made the pass. But, man, when you watch that game, I finally watched it again about a year ago.
Oh, my God, no.
Yeah, it took me a while, to say the least. And I was appalled how bad. I mean, both teams had a lot of open shots. It was not a pretty basketball game, that's for sure.
Well, it's similar to what we saw today a little bit. Sometimes these games, you could just kind of feel it hanging in the air. We talked about Harden in that Rocket series, and then you coached him. And this is somebody who's unquestionably one of the best 40 players of all time. But the postseason stuff is just going to be in the first sentence of when he's discussed, for the next 50 years. You saw it firsthand. What's missing from him as a postseason guy? You coached against him. You coached him, or is it a bad rap?
No, I don't think anything's missing, Bill. I think what makes James great is that he's one of the best individual players to ever play the game. Ball handling, handles the ball, dribbles the ball, attacks, but that also allows you to attack. You know where he's at, and you know where the ball is at. And so in the playoffs, when teams are game planning against you each game, double teaming, taking the ball out of your hand, making it harder, it's easier to do that to James compared to do that. How do you take Steph out of a game? Right. He's running around, he's moving, it's hard. It's funny, Steve Kerr, we beat Golden State, and Steve Kerr used that game and how we trapped him. If you remember, in game 6 and 7, we started trapping. He used that and showed Steph, like, hey, it's too easy in big games down the stretch to stop you because they know where the ball is at. You remember Chicago, Doug Collins used to let Michael bring the ball up the floor. Right. And then they got in the playoffs, you knew where the ball, you knew where Michael was at, and so you attack. Phil comes in, and the triangle was moving. Now, at the end of the game, Phil Jackson still went to pick and roll, with Michael Jordan. Having said that, it was the movement and the inability to find where you can trap him that made it so hard. And I think that's James's kryptonite, right now. But I don't believe the whole thing that he quits and all that stuff. I just think teams make him struggle because they know where they're at, and it's easier to find them.
Did you like coaching him? Was it okay? Like, how would you rate the experience?
It was challenging, more because we were fighting two things, and not like visually fighting, is that James is so good at playing one way. And the way that I believe you have to play to win in some ways is different because it's a lot of giving up the ball, moving the ball, coming back to the ball. I would have loved to have him younger when that was easier for him because giving up the ball and getting back the ball is hard. Like, it's physical, it's exhausting. So it's been interesting if I had him younger, where he could have done that more. Coming off of dribble handoffs, going down the hill. He didn't finish as well as he finished because he's older, and that happens. So yeah, at times to get him to move it and play the way I needed him to play. I thought the first half of the year, I thought we were the best team in the game. I thought James was playing perfect basketball. Like
I agree with you.
he was a point guard of the team. He was still scoring, but he was doing more playmaking and scoring. And then the second half, he started scoring more, trying to score more. And I thought we got stagnant at times. So I thought we changed.
Interesting. So, all right, let's say you have Embiid, you have Maxey. Who's the perfect third guy? If you like, if you were just if it was a fantasy league, you don't have to say the exact player, but
well, you're saying if you don't have James,
let's take James out of it, and you're replacing James with a different type of player because Embiid's had all these different teammates, right? And really, Jimmy, I thought was the one that probably clicked with him the best. Embiid was bad in that Toronto series, but Jimmy was that type. Is it that type of guy you would want with Embiid?
Yeah, you would want a guy, and I think James did a little bit of that. Like James would speak up, and so you need that. You need another alpha in the room. So if Joe is not doing something, to call Joe on Joe, you got to do this, and Joe will listen to that.
What about
really
offensively though? What is the offensive fit?
If I could pick the perfect guy without a name, it would be a big point guard who could score. Because, and the reason is we need a playmaker other than Joel. And then Maxey right now is more of a scorer. He's a downhill scorer with speed. Maybe the dude brings joy to every coach in the room. You would love Tyrese Maxey. Just every day being Tyrese Maxey. But when we can free him up to just go score and be you can make a case like a Ginobili.
Interesting.
Who at times was their point, with his passing, gave them toughness, was an attacker, was great off the ball, but that allowed Tony Parker to just go and be free. Like someone in that category would be the perfect fit.
So like a glue guy playmaker. All right.
Yeah.
So you're taking the year off. Is that official?
Oh, yeah. I'm not doing this is the first time in, I don't know how many years, 22, 23 years, that I haven't started a season in training camp coaching a team. And I'm just going to sit back and do a little podcast and TVs and enjoy myself if I can. I don't know if I can get through it. Like, Bill, I've never done it. I haven't done it in a long time. I don't know if it'll drive me crazy. But I plan on going to a bunch of football practices because I love football. I think football is so much more advanced than us because they have to coach so many more people. I'm going to go down to Alabama and spend some time with Nick Saban. I'm going to go back to New England and hang out with my man Bill. And I'm going to go to Kansas City as well, football-wise. And then I'm going to go to a lot of basketball practices and just sit back and watch. It's funny with me. It's always, the only time I go to an NBA practice with someone, it's the coach has to feel, I want to make sure he's safe and feels secure because the last thing I want is to start crap, if you know what I mean. So
I got you. Well, I mean, you're one of the deans of all the coaches. I think one of the things people, maybe the general public doesn't know is like for the other coaches, you're one of the guys. You're like the godfather
a lot of time
figure.
with coaches. I love it. I don't love if I know if I'm a dean, but I love just coaches call a lot, and I love sharing and I love talking. Who taught me that was Larry Brown. I remember Larry Brown used to have all these coaching clinics, and I remember asking Coach, "Why do you have these clinics with these guys in the league? How are you trying to beat these guys?" And I was a player, and he says, "Doc, first of all, you learn as much as you give. You would be amazed at how much you're teaching and you end up learning just as much just from being around these guys. Everyone has their own individual brain and you pick from everybody. And that happens all the time for me. So we never stop learning. That's what I'm going to do."